everyone, welcome back to another episode of Attack on Productions. Fluff here, coming at you with another deck profile. But before we get into that, make sure to do all the YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know the things that you want to see in the future. Let us know how you're feeling about the channel. What are things that we can do better, things that you'd like to see, etc., etc. Also would like to just kind of plug this big kind of announcement. We do have a Patreon coming up that we're going to launch, featuring deck articles, test sessions, deck doctor segments, things like that. I think Jimmy, myself, Bancroft, and Jake are all pretty excited to work on all those things with you. So stay tuned. We'll make an official video announcing all that and giving all the details up once we're ready to launch it. But getting straight into the video, today we're talking about Supreme Kai of Time, the Chrono Keeper. So this was one of the more interesting archetypes to me that came out of set 13. And unfortunately, I think this deck has a couple negatives to it that I just want to touch on before I get into the actual video. I think, one, that this deck is gate kept behind a bunch of promos that could be expensive or difficult to find. And also the deck is pretty counterable if you know how to play against it. So that's a huge mark off against this deck. But all things considered, where we're at in the format and the flexibility of the format, I think this is a good, fun rogue deck. I finished with it at second at our locals this week and was just super happy with the performance of the deck. I did make some changes, minor adjustments and tweaks from the gameplay that you'll see, but I will kind of talk about those as we get there. So, talking about the leader, on the front side, the leader's pretty simple. Auto, burst 3, when this card attacks, draw 1. So, top 3 cards of your deck into the drop area, draw 1. Then, the awaken condition is when you have 4 or less life or 8 or more cards in your warp, take your life down to 6, draw 2 cards, then flip this leader over. So, we don't get the energy flipping, but we do get hand advantage for awakening. We can awaken pretty consistently around turn 2 if we need to. And this is one of those that you want to awaken faster rather than slower, because there's a lot of advantages to being on your awaken side. So on the awaken side, we no longer get the auto draw a card when you swing. Instead, we're going to get an auto once per turn. When you play a card using Overwhelm, you're going to send 3 black battle cards from your warp to your drop. Then you're going to draw 1 card. So generally on the turn that you awaken, you're going to want to swing, get your burst, draw your card. Then you're going to, if you already have 8 in the warp, you're going to go on ahead and awaken, then Overwhelm, so you get 3 cards back into your drop, and you're going to get to draw again. So it's 2 cards drawn on your awaken turn. Otherwise, we may Overwhelm, awaken, and then Overwhelm again, which you'll see how we do that. But the card has 2 additional activate mains. So the first activate main for 1 black energy, if you don't have a Unison in play, you can choose a specified Unison with an energy cost of 1 in your warp or drop area. With no specified cost, with 9,000 power in your warp or drop, and play it. So we do play a non-specified black Unison with 9,000 power in here. This pretty much just guarantees that at any point we're going to have a Unison on board. And sometimes your opponent will functionally take that Unison out, and depending on when they choose to do that, it can be pretty irksome for you as a player having to respend 1 energy for your Unison. Best case scenario, you're playing your Unison off of this activate main instead of out of your hand anyway. So I try not to mulligan for a Unison in turn 1. If I have it, I have it. If I don't, it just becomes like a charge. But you want the Unison available to you. The second activate main, which I think is the more important, is place 1 card from your life into your drop area, then place 2 battle cards. Place up to 2 black battle cards from your warp to your drop, and then battle cards you play using Overwhelm aren't sent to your warp at the end of the turn. So this lets us keep our field presence from activating Overwhelms. So the check on the Overwhelm skill to send to the warp occurs at the end of the turn that they're played. So if you play an Overwhelm, activate this effect, you no longer have to worry about that card being warped at the end of the turn, because it's only in that first turn that it was played. So keep that in mind. We want to activate this sparingly, just as we need it, because it does cost us a life to do so, and the deck isn't particularly defensive outside of that. So that's the leader. Moving on first, let's talk about the Unison. So Demigras Momentary Ally. This Unison is actually really interesting for a number of different reasons. One, it's a play extender And then 2, it's one of the few cards in the game that actually have Wormhole. So it's auto, and this isn't one of its Unison effects. This is just an auto. Once per turn, if your leader card is a Black Saiyan or God only card, when you play a card using Overwhelm, this card gains Wormhole for the turn. So Wormhole, for those of you that don't know, is a skill that allows you to Overwhelm or Dark Overwhelm twice per turn instead of once per turn. So instead of being limited to playing 1 card via Overwhelm, we have 2. On the +1 activate main, place up to 2 black battle cards from your warp into your drop, which kind of is a minor play extension for us to getting to play another Overwhelm per turn. And then -3 is activate main, add up to 2 battle cards with energy costs of 7 or less and Overwhelm skill from warp to hand. So if we need to get certain cards back, you know, there are good Overwhelm targets in our warp that we've played and have been warped off, we can add those back to hand, or we can add cards back for combo power later on. The -3 doesn't come up. Most people try to keep you off of it, despite it not being a particularly game-changing skill. Your opponent still doesn't want you having that recursiveness behind it. So with this Unison, we pretty much guarantee that with the Unison leader on field, we're getting 2 Overwhelms, and then between the leader and Unison alone, we're putting 5 cards from our warp into our drop. So, and as you'll see, there are plenty of cards that manipulate the number of cards in your warp and your drop area as we're going through all the cards. So it's really easy to activate like an Overwhelm 3 and then an Overwhelm 6 over the course of a turn. And what I meant behind like the deck being kind of fragile, just touching on that real quick, if you play a card using Overwhelm and your opponent counterplays that Overwhelm, then you don't get the auto on the leader or the Unison, and you just miss out on those for the turn because you're warping your drop area. You no longer have a recursive play. He doesn't have Wormhole. You don't get your draw for the leader, and it just stalls you out for that one turn. It is completely recoverable. You can recover from it. It's kind of hard to. Moving on to our Overwhelm package, I do play 3 of the Trunks Thwarting the Dark Empire. These are Overwhelm 2 double strike. If your leader card is a black Supreme Kai of Time card, when this card is played using Overwhelm, send up to 2 cards from the top of your deck to your warp, then draw 1 card. It's a 10,000 double strike. I mainly use this card in the first turn or 2 to get an extra Overwhelm in that's pretty cheap. So on the leader side, if all we have is the 2 Overwhelm from the Demigras activate main, we can play the Trunks, get 3 cards in our warp, and then it's easier for us to play extension from there. Or if in the first turn or 2 your opponent boards a Unison that you need to clear off, the Trunks is a really easy way to do that because it's a double strike, so you can just swing, combo a card out of your hand, and then you double strike on the Unison. Almost never purposefully try to save this card with the leader effect. You know, we just want it to come in. We want it to move our resources around. We want it to do a double strike to a Unison. Otherwise, it just becomes a charge target. It's not particularly valuable in any situation other than that. Then our next kind of staple Overwhelm is going to be Trunks Time Regulator. So this is an Overwhelm 3. And when you play this card using Overwhelm, you're going to draw 2 cards, then choose 1 card in your hand and place it in your warp. It would be better if this would place a card into the drop area, but that's what the black Bardock Overwhelm does. You draw 2 and discard 1 card. The exchange is that he is only an Overwhelm 3. The Bardock is an Overwhelm 4. It's 1 card. What difference does 1 card in the drop makes? It can actually mean a lot. It can be the difference between you having to combo off a card to get in another Overwhelm or having to play additionally hard to make an Overwhelm. So I prefer the Trunks over the Bardock just because you pretty much at any point in time can make an Overwhelm 3 with this deck with little to no effort. So 4 of these, they're 15,000 swings. Don't save them with the leader effect unless you absolutely have to, or it's incidentally saved off of another card. Then our other staple Overwhelm card is going to be the Vegeta, or the Ride Ravager Vegeta. So this is a Overwhelm 3. It's critical, 15,000. But then when you play this card using Overwhelm, you're going to place 3 cards, up to 3 cards from the top of your deck into your drop area. So this is going to play extend and basically set you up for an Overwhelm 6 if this is your first Overwhelm in the turn, because you're going to Overwhelm, the leader effect will burst, we'll send 3 cards from the warp to the drop, and then he will send 3 cards from the top of the deck to the drop, and you'll draw 1 card. It instantly sets up that Overwhelm 6 without even having to have the Unison uses +1. So in that case, you would probably immediately follow up with a 6-drop Overwhelm and then activate the Unison's +1 to put 2 cards in the drop area to set yourself up for something next turn. But these cards are fantastic. They create a lot of pressure for your opponent because your opponent doesn't like to take crit. I would consider him being, if you had to choose between saving him or a Trunks at any point in the game, I would save the Vegeta over the Trunks with the leader effect. Moving on, not staples, but I think necessary evils in the deck. We do run 2 of the Trunks Power Overseeing Time. These are overall form for 2 energy. I will say that 2 energy is a lot in this deck. Black is very similar to green in that the more expensive that something is, the more of a steep cost that it is. The deck doesn't like to pay large numbers to play cards out. Black as a color just generally doesn't like to do that. So having the 2 is a pretty steep cost, but I think in this situation, it's a cost that's worth it. So the card is a $20,000 or 20,000 power double strike. And then when you play this card using Overwhelm, you choose 1 battle card in your warp area and add it to your hand. This is really important for recovering maybe your Champas or your secret rare. Because if you mill your secret rare or burst your secret rare or send your secret rare to the warp mistakenly over the course of a game, there's no way to get it back. So we do run 2 of the Trunks in case we need to do it. It may never come up. We may never need this. Generally, you're not going to use the Trunks to just grab any old Overwhelm. There's cheaper, more effective ways to do it in the deck, but the Trunks is just there to grab the secret rare or something like Champa, something you otherwise would not be able to fetch back by the general engines in the deck. So 2 of these guys. Then we play 2 of the Demon God Demigras out of Draft Box 3. These, again, are 2 energy. It's a really steep cost, and because it's a 2 energy Overwhelm, I could advise not playing more than 2. You'll see them over the course of the game. They're pretty easy to find. They're pretty easy. You generally will come across them one way or the other. But for 2 energy, this card is really flexible. When it's played, you draw 1 card, then you warp one of your opponent's battle cards. When it attacks, your opponent chooses 1 card out of their hand and warps it. He's a 30,000 body that is played with Dark Overwhelm, so you don't have to activate your leader's effect to keep this guy around. He will just stick around all on his own. You could play this at a higher count of. We happen to only have 2. 2 has worked perfectly fine for me. But if you do have a full play set of these, I think that it would operate just fine out of 3 of them in the deck. Just be aware that paying the 2 energy for this card can be sometimes disruptive, especially if you need to reboard your Unison, or you need to recover your secret rare, or you need to keep up energy for defense. You may not want to play this card, and it may not always be the right time to play this card, which is why I feel very comfortable at it being at a 2 of. It always performed well for me. I don't see any need beyond more than that. And this deck does play very toolboxy. You play a lot of 1-ofs, a lot of 2-ofs. So kind of in the promo side of things that might get a little expensive, though this card is going down dramatically in price. We've got the Mass Sand Brainwash No More. He's an Overwhelm 6, and when this card is played using Overwhelm, you place 3 black battle cards from your warp into your drop, which again is another fantastic play and extender. And then probably equally as important is its Activate Battle skill. So for 1 black energy, you discard this card from your hand, and then you choose 1 card in your life, place it in your drop area, and then you don't take damage for the battle. So if your opponent goes really hard into a double strike or a triple strike that would otherwise kill you, you could save this guy, use its effect to keep yourself from dying, and possibly win on the crackback. So I would ultimately play this at a 2-of. I will say that right now. I would play this at a 2-of. We only have 1, and I'm waiting for my second to come in. But even at that, the effect doesn't always come up. The card is not 100% necessary. I did plenty of testing with this deck online and didn't ever really have Brainwash No More because I didn't have any at that time. So I didn't test with it in the deck and didn't miss it. And even testing with it in the deck, I didn't feel like the difference was all that high. The condition for the Activate Battle is kind of far and few between, and the Overwhelm 3 cards from Warp to drop, other cards in your deck do the same thing. So while this card is fantastic, it's not absolutely necessary, hence why I'm fine playing at a 1-of. Another one of, and I almost took this guy out, and I think this would end up being the Brainwash No More if I had another one, but this is the SS4 Goku Beyond All Limits. It's another Overwhelm 6. When you play it, you choose one of your black battle cards with you choose one of your black battle cards with an energy cost between 3 and 7 in your warp and add it back to your hand. I mainly use this to grab specific targets that I need for play extension back. So if I've warped both of my Trunks and I need my secret rare, I could use this to grab a Trunks. If I want to grab a Fighting Against Fate or Brainwash No More back to my hand, I can use this and grab that card back. Not necessary. I was testing this at a 3 of in the deck. I was testing it at a 2 of in the deck. And while I did use it from time to time, it was never really using it to add a card back. It was just to put a 30,000 body on the field. And I feel like there are just better options for doing that. There are cards that do better things. So one of these is fine. When I do get the Brainwash No More, this will become the second Brainwashed. Then we've got 2 of the SS4 Bardock Fighting Against Fate. These are 25,000 dual attack Overwhelm 6. Just fantastic ways to close games, to apply pressure. With the leader skill, these guys get to linger around a bit. Do watch out for Heroine's Lineage because they can 100% take these guys. So 2 of those. Could play 3 if you've got 3. I felt perfectly fine at a 2 of. I usually try to strategically insert 1 into my warp, so when I play the secret rare, I get to play 1 out from the warp with the secret rare skill. So this is one of the few cards that it's the best part of it is not linked behind being played with Overwhelm. So even with the secret rare, this card is really good. So 2 of those could be a 3 of, but 2 is perfectly fine. Then I run 2 of the SS4 Vegeta Thwarting the Dark Empire. I've seen a lot of deck profiles that favor the new Vegeta promo that is a free Overwhelm 6 that warps a card out of the hand. I like that card. It's perfectly fine if that suits your playstyle. I found this to be better. Even though you are paying 1 energy for it, the ability to, when it attacks, you choose a number of your opponent's battle cards that add up to 4 or less and send them to the owner's warp is oftentimes really disruptive for your opponent. Then if you use the leader's skill, you have that every time. Plus he's a critical. So this card pairs very well with Champa, Champa Furthering Destruction. It pairs very well with a number of different cards in the deck. And it is a Vegeta GT with 30,000, which is very relevant for another card that you will see kind of moving forward. But I love this card. I like it more than the promo. Assuming, well, that 1 energy for an extra crit and warping off the field is worth it. Then we play 3 of the SS4 Sungoku Thwarting the Dark Empire. These guys, I think, are fantastic and really a necessary evil for the deck because they are a blocker. They are 1 black energy to play, but when you attack, you draw 1 card, and then at the end of the turn, you restand this card. So you have a 30,000 body that can absorb just about any attack in the game, and if you lose the card in battle, it's just fine. If your opponent wastes energy to get rid of this card, then they're just wasting a resource to get rid of this card instead of using that energy to further push against your life. I like playing this as much as I can. I hold these in my hand to play them, and they're absolutely a card that I would choose to save with the leader's effect. Now, we just saw a Goku and Vegeta GT, so with that, we've got the SS3 Gogeta Thwarting the Dark Empire. Now, when we talked about expensive promos that kind of gate the deck, we've already seen most of them. You know, the Fighting Against Fate Bardock, the Mass Saiyan Brainwash No More, and then this guy. Generally, I can't recommend a promo that is at the $100 plus range, but this guy does so much for the deck that it's not even funny. Number 1, he's an Overwhelm 6 for 1 black energy. So he fits into the theme of the deck being able to Overwhelm. I think more importantly, though, is that he is a Union Fusion for 1 black energy. You can use cards in your warp and place them in your drop, which is a play extension for you. So if you have the leader, you have the Unison, you activate his Union Fusion effect, you put 2 cards back into your drop area, you Overwhelm, or you Overwhelm with the leader before that. You've got 3 cards, you activate his effects, you put 2 in, that's 5. You activate the Unison for 2, that's 7. And then you only have to combo 1 and you're at Overwhelm 8. Or you automatically meet Overwhelm 6. For 1 energy, you've set up all of that to be able to make a full power turn. And this isn't it's not gated to when you can play this card. You could, if you had the setup for it, you could play this guy turn 1, and then you start with a 25,000 double strike that warps one of your opponent's battle cards every time it attacks. This card is fantastic. It is extremely flexible in the deck, and well balanced by the fact that it has unique. I feel like if this card didn't have unique, you'd play it at a 4 of, and you'd focus the deck towards playing these guys out and just keeping your opponent clear. So these are important. You could play the deck without them, but the deck just misses something. It's kind of like the Brawly with the red Brawly, or the Switching Gears Vegeta for King Vegeta. The deck just really lacks something if you don't have these. These are play extenders. They're great pression. They're great removal. Just, you've got to play them 3 ofs. Then at a 1 of, I play a Fu the Dark Banisher. This is an Overwhelm 8 for 4 triple attack. If your opponent activates an effect, they have to discard 1 card from their hand to the warp. I was running this at a 2 of. The big problem is that 4 energy for a black deck is incredibly expensive. I mean, this is almost equivalent to a blue deck tapping 5 or a green deck tapping 5. I mean, it is really hard to justify tapping 4, and I would only do it if I had a full field and felt like I could clear the game out, and this would punish my opponent for activating negates. So we are running these. They're fantastic. I wish that it was grabbable off of the Rivalry Secret Rare. Sadly, it's not. That would be broken if it was. Then we've got the Rivalry Secret Rare. Demigras Secretary. So this card is an ultimate double strike. Dark Overwhelm for 2 energy. Permanent, if this card would be removed from a battle area, remove it from the game instead. So Dark Overwhelm, it's going to persist. Auto, if you have 4 more energy when this card is played using Dark Overwhelm, play up to 2 black battle cards with different names, energy cost of 6 and less, and the Overwhelm skill. So generally there's a ton of Overwhelm targets in the deck. So you're going to Overwhelm her, you're going to grab like an SS3 Gogeta thwarting the Dark Empire, you're going to grab a Bardock fighting against Fate, you're going to grab a Goku or Vegeta thwarting the Dark Empire, you're going to grab anything really that would just add different bodies on the field. You could grab the Demigras. The fact is you get to play a ton of, for just 2 energy, you get to play this out. Then the icing on the cake, though probably not relevant in most situations. Most of the times when you play this, the game just ends. But, you know, it does have another auto when your opponent attacks, you choose one of your battle cards with Overwhelm, send it to the drop area, and then negate that attack. So that is not once per turn, and there have been games where I've had like 8 or 9 Overwhelms on the field, and my opponent would attack, and you can just send one to drop area, negate the attack, send another one, negate the attack, send another one. So this is where your defense comes from, but you don't get there until about turn 4, because you don't want to play her and not be able to get the free plays out of it, because that's really what makes this card super worth it. And if your opponent gets rid of it, it gets removed from the game instead, which sucks, but we love this card. I love this secret rare. It's probably my favorite secret rare to come out of set 13, and I'll stand by that. Fantastic card. Now, moving into our non-Overwhelm engine, I do play 3 of these Sungoku Catastrophic Premonitions. These are unique double strike. If your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand using a non-leader skill, he gains 10,000 until the end of your next turn. So you play him on your opponent's turn, they draw a card with a battle card, gets 10,000. Your turn, they use a super combo, he gets another 10,000, he's a 25,000 double strike. Then you swing with him, the turn ends, he's still at 15,000. And then, you know, this card can easily get up to 35,000 for a turn. And then it kind of falls back off to the 10,000 range, or the 15,000 range. But fantastic card, good pressure. Your opponent will usually waste resources trying to get this card out. It's frustrating for your opponent to have to try to play around this, or just accept the fact that they're going to have to spend a negate on a 1-drop. So 3 of those. Another promo for the deck, though not a super expensive one, is Time Patrol Son Goten. I only have 2 of these. I would probably optimally play this at a 3 of, just because it is a super play extender for you. You know, the leader gives you 3 from warp to drop. The Unison gives you 2. the Goten, while it's on the field and you play a card using Overwhelm, you send 3 cards from your warp to your drop. So for Overwhelming, you automatically, between the leader and the Goten, get 6 cards from your warp to your drop, which activates your ability to do an Overwhelm 6. Or if you activate the Unison's effect, you now have Overwhelm 8 or Dark Overwhelm 8 to activate your secret rare or go into a Fu. Card would probably be better if it had Barrier on it. It is only a 2-drop 10,000. Its second activate main, its second auto, second activate main, we don't really use because that plays out the Goten stuff, or the Gotenk stuff. And I tested the Gotenk stuff. It's just clunky, and most of the time it just gets in your way, clogs your hand, is never really played. So this is really the only thing out of that we play. So we don't care about that activate main. It is literally just to tap 2 energy, put it out. When you activate Overwhelm, get 3 cards back into your drop area. If your opponent chooses to do something about this card, then they're just getting rid of this card instead of doing something else. I would play it at a 3 of, just so you see it more often. Not that you ever want to put 2 or 3 out. I think maybe maximum I would put 1 out per game. You just want to make sure you see it more consistently. But even if you don't see it, the deck still moves just fine without this card. So don't worry about it. If you only have 2 of these, if you only have 1 of these, play on any you've got. It'll work fine either way. Then I play 2 of the Gravy and Demigras Thrall. These are just tech choices for me. They're a combo. When you combo with them, you place 2 battle cards from your warp to your drop. Really, that's it. We're just using this to place cards that were in our warp into our drop for play extension. You don't want to be overloaded with these. You just want to hold them until you need that extra bit of play extension. So just 2 of them, they fit fantastic. Or if you pay 2 energy for this guy, every time you attack with him, he also gets that send 2 from warp to drop. So if you want to spend the 2 energy to play him out for that kind of turn-to-turn recursion, you could, though I usually just choose to combo with him. Then for kind of a control, flexibility over matches, I do play of the Mechikabura, the Broken Seal. This is more of a last-minute addition to the deck, because there were just situations where there were things that I knew that were coming up that I just had to hope either my opponent didn't have, or I had to hope that I had enough counter to deal with and enough combo power to combo out of. So had I just had this, I could have saved myself the heartache, just tap 2, put Mechikabura out there, called the card that I was afraid of, and then my opponent couldn't have played it. So I think this is really important because black in general just lacks defense. So if you're up against something like Red Brawly or Dark Brawly, where you know there's going to be a big push coming, you can just play this, call the card that you're worried about, and then your opponent can't play it and can't pressure you the way that you want them to, or the way that they want to. So 2 of these, just fine. 3 probably clogs too much. 2, you'll see it just fine. Then our super combos, we run 4 of the Vegeta, the Prince Strikes Back. Again, I'm all about my quality super combos. I love these. You don't want to play the Sparking super combos because you almost never have Sparking in this deck. And I make a pretty controversial deck building decision that I'll talk about here in a moment, but you don't want Sparking anything in this deck. So Vegeta, Prince Strikes Back, quality, send a card back that's doing nothing for you and draw 2 cards. And also, it is a 5,000 Vegeta that you can use with Catastrophic Premonition to make the SS3 Gogeta thwarting the Dark Empire. So while we don't run a ton of Goku and Vegeta targets, we do run enough that at any given point, we've got 1 of each Goku and Vegeta to play thwarting the Dark Empire out with Union Fusion. Then for pressure, I run 1 thwarting Destruction Champa. This could easily be 2. I just know there are games where, your energy is kind of tight, and I've lost games where I had a Fu and a Champa in hand that I couldn't combo with. So, as much as I want to include 2 Champa, most of the time they're going to sit there until you can't use them. The counter argument to that is you do run a couple 30,000 crits. You do run a couple 15,000 crits. You run more than a couple 30,000 single strikes that could easily be bumped up to a double strike. So Champa, if you're going really aggressive, is fantastic at all points in this deck. But the deck can just be a little too energy tight to want to bog down your hand with this. So just 1, I think that's all you need. You can get it back with the Trunks if you need it. Then, kind of moving on to the counters, I do run 3 of the Supreme Kai of Time, the Labyrinth Unleashed. So this is a counterattack, negate the attack, play this card. Permanent, if you have 3 or more cards in your warp, or your opponent has 3 or more cards in their warp, you reduce the energy cost of this card by 2. So she becomes a 1-drop counterattack. When she's played, you choose one of your opponent's battle cards, send it to the warp. And then at the end phase of the turn, that card is played back to their side of the field, to the player's side of the field, with its skills negated for the turn. So this is really important for things like if you're up against Sen Shenron and they have a 9-drop and they're attacking with it. You play this, it warps the 9-drop Sen Shenron. The 9-drop comes back, is no longer a blocker, can no longer negate your skills, no longer gets its draw to replay a Dragon Ball if you take it off the field. So it's just a perfect way to disrupt. Likewise, in the blue matchup, if they put out a 10-drop Gohan and they swing with the Gohan before they activate their main, you play this, warp the Gohan off, it comes back and it's just a 35,000 body. So, or even against something like Cell Zeno. Your opponent clears their field to play Cell, rip 3 cards out of your hand, they swing with it, you counter Kai, warp the Cell, they lose their dual attack, they lose their quad strike, and they just get a Cell back that's just a 40,000 body after that. There's no limit on this. As long as the card doesn't have barrier, this card can hit it. So, fantastic card, and probably the best negate in the deck if I had to imagine. Now, this is kind of the big controversial pick in the deck. I don't run Power Burst. I run 3 Protector of the People. And I was playing it with Power Burst. And after the event at Locals, I realized that in the entire night, if I played Power Burst, I spent 1 energy for it. And if I'm going to spend an energy for a Power Burst, I'm going to spend an energy for a Protector of the People, where I will gain a richer depth of protection over the course of a turn than just getting my 1-1-drop back. I only run 1-1-drop in the deck. You know, it's 3 of the Catastrophic Premonition Gokus, but that's the only 1-drop that I run. So Power Burst isn't heavily valuable for me. And additionally, you almost never have Sparking 5. Unless something has happened where you weren't able to complete your second overwhelm in a turn after getting all of your recovery. But most of the time, you're going to want to extend with those overwhelms because that is your pressure. That is your win condition. And you're going to strategically pass with 1 or 2 energy open per turn anyway. So why not have a negate along with the Kai that is going to functionally modulate the game for you? So Protector of the People is fantastic for decks that want to go wide, you know, against Dark Brawly. Dark Brawly is really hard because they're swinging at you with 30,000s and you have to combo hard to get out of 1 attack. But this makes it so it closes that gap a little bit and reduces that pressure a smidge. But against something like King Vegeta or Bardock's crew or Majin Vegeta or Turn 2 Han, having this can actually make it a lot easier for you to combo and survive those big push turns because it makes it harder for your opponent to deal damage the longer that turn goes on. So I think these are important over the Power Bursts. Alternatively, Petrification would be a good choice depending on your meta. You know, does your opponent rely on effects or going wide? In our meta, I think wideness is more of a symptom of our playstyle than using effects that Petrification would be better at. So just depending on your meta, but 4 Protector of the People, or 3 Protector of the People, sorry. And then the last 2 cards in the deck, we've got Super Kamehameha. We don't play a ton of battle cards per turn, but one of the things that we don't want to happen, we don't want to get stuck under Topo. We don't want to get stuck under the Yellow Frieza. We don't want to get stuck over, you know, under cards that would otherwise disrupt our turns. And we want to keep our opponent off of certain cards that they may play. So in the Dark Brawly matchup, you know, being able to Super Kamehameha their 1-drop Brawly or their Toa, or against the Red Brawly matchup, if you've managed to clear their field and they're trying to reestablish, you know, let them get their 1-drop Brawly. Let them go into their 3-drop. They're going to spend the energy to go in the 4, hit them with the Super Kamehameha, and just end their momentum. You know, there are just times that this card is invaluable. There are games that this card does nothing, but I think you want it for the times that you really need it. So if I'm not mistaken, my math on that is 55 cards. As always, it's been kind of a wordy profile, but I hope you got an idea what this deck can do and what it's all about. It plays very toolboxy. It's super easy to counter. You know, if you're having trouble against Supreme Kai, the big thing that I can say is pull out your, if you're playing red, pull out your Denial of Hopes and let Denial of Hope wreck, because you counterplay one of the Overwhelm cards and then the Supreme Kai player just cries for a turn because they now have to combo big cards out of their hand to set up another Overwhelm for the next turn. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed. I've really loved this deck. I'm going to play it again. I'm definitely not done with this deck. I'm going to keep playing with it probably into set 14. It's kind of my new pet project right now. But let me know what you think of the profile below. If there are cards that you would choose that I happen to miss, there are definitely a lot of cards that I think Bancroft is tired of theory crafting on this deck with me, because I keep asking him for advice and I keep asking Jake and Jimmy for their thoughts on this deck. And there's just so many possibilities in this deck. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed it. As always, read your cards, know your plays. Let us make mistakes so you don't have to. And as always, Fluff out. I love you guys.